Jaya Jaya Guru Des Guru Govinda Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Shishi Karunitai Maya Poshashi Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastai Bhutale Shimati Shivaram Swami Dinama Glories to Shri Prabhupada. We're reading from the Leelamrita of Srila Prabhupada, the pastimes of Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. This is chapter entitled I've Done My Part, 1977. As Prabhupada spoke of the Mayapur devotees, he had been willing to sacrifice their lives for Krishna. He became choked with emotion and he began to cry. Krishna will give them protection, he said. Our Mayapur men. He mentioned how Haridas Thakur had also been put into jail and beaten, and how Prahlad had been tortured until Lord Nrsimha had appeared. Don't be worried, said Srila Prabhupada, crying and speaking as if all his Mayapur devotees were directly in front of him. Krishna will protect you. We are doing our best as far as our intelligence goes. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted that in every nook and corner of the world, this movement should be pushed. We are limited. In an attempt to ease Prabhupada's Tamil Krishna started reading the latest report from Ganesham, who is distributing books in Eastern Europe. The report of extraordinary success drew Prabhupada's attention away from Mayapur. He smiled and said, that is dynamic. Tamil Krishna continued reading the report. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam. It's Canto 5, and it's chapter 16, which is entitled A Description of Jambu Dweep. And we're on text 2, is it? Yeah. Okay. So I'll run through the Sanskrit of 2, and we'll do the word for word for 3. Tatrapi Priyavrata Rata Charana Parikatai Saptabi Sapta Sindhava Upakalpita Yata Itasya Saptadvij Dvipa Vishesha Vikalpas Tvaya Bhagavan Kalo Suchita Etad Evakilam Aham Manato Lakshanantas Chasavam Vigyanasami. Translation. My dear Lord, the rolling wheels of Maharaj Priyavrata's chariot created 7 ditches in which the 7 oceans came into existence. Because of these 7 oceans, Bhumandal is divided into 7 islands. You have given a very general description of their measurement, names, and characteristics. Now I wish to know of them in detail. Kindly fulfill my desire. On to text 3. I'll run through the Sanskrit again. Bhagavato Gunamaye Shtula Rupa Aveshitam Manohi Agune Pi Shukshamatama Atma Jyotisi Pari Brahmani Bhagavati Vasudevake Shamam Aveshitam Atad U Hetad Guru Harasya Anuvanayitam Iti. Okay, responsibly please. Bhagavata of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gunamaye into the external features consisting of the three modes of material nature. Stula Rupe, the gross form. Aveshitam, entered. Mana, the mind. He, indeed. Agune, transcendental. Happy, although. Shukshamatame, in his smaller form as Paramatma within the heart. Ata Jyotishi, who is full of Brahman effulgence. Hare, the Supreme. Brahmani, spiritual entity. Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vasudev Akye, known as Bhagavan Vasudev. Shamam, suitable. Aveshitam, to absorb. Tat, that. Uha, indeed. Etat, this. Guru, O my dear spiritual master. Ahasi anuvanaitam, please describe factually. Iti, thus. Translation: when the mind is fixed upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his external feature made of the material modes of nature, the gross universal form, it is brought to the platform of pure goodness. In that transcendental position, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, who in his subtler form is self-effulgent and beyond the modes of nature. O my Lord, please describe vividly how that form, which covers the entire universe, is perceived. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Maharaj Pariksha had already been advised by his spiritual master Shukadeva Goswami to think of the universal form of the Lord, and therefore, following the advice of his spiritual master, he continuously thought of that form. The universal form is certainly material, but because everything is an expansion of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, ultimately nothing is material. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj's mind was saturated with spiritual consciousness. Srila Rupa Goswami has stated, Prapanchitaya Buddhaya Hari Sambandhi Vasudana Mumukshubi Parityago Vairagyam Falgo Katyate. Everything, even that which is material, is connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, everything should be engaged in the service of the Lord. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur translates this verse as follows: Hari Sevaya Yaha Haya Anukula Vishaya Baliya Tahara Chaga Haya Bula. One should not give up anything connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thinking immaterial or enjoyable for the material senses. Even the senses, when purified, are spiritual. When Maharaj Pariksha was thinking of the universal form of the Lord, his mind was certainly situated on the transcendental platform. Therefore, although he might not have had any reason to be concerned with detailed information of the universe, he was thinking of it in relationship with the Supreme Lord. And therefore, geographical knowledge was not material, but transcendental. Elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.20, Narada Muni has said, Idam hi Vishvan Bhagavan Ivetara. The entire universe is also the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although it appears different from him. Therefore, although Parikshit Maharaj had no need for geographical knowledge of this universe, that knowledge was also spiritual and transcendental, because he was thinking of the entire universe as an expansion of the energy of the Lord. In our preaching work also, we deal with so much property and money and so many books bought and sold. But because these dealings all pertain to the Krishna consciousness movement, they should never be considered material. That one is absorbed in thoughts of such management does not mean that he is outside of Krishna consciousness. If one rigidly observes the regular principle of chanting 16 rounds of the Maha mantra every day, his dealings with the material world for the sake of spreading the Krishna consciousness movement are not different from the spiritual cultivation of Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Malitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikapatrubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha. Panitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So Srila Prabhupada making the point in the purport that everything actually is spiritual when it's connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he quotes Rupa Goswami and also Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. One shouldn't give up anything connected with the Supreme Personality of God, thinking it material or enjoyable for the material senses. So that's interesting that if you take something, whatever it is, and you decide you want to enjoy it for yourself, then it can become material. And if you can understand that whatever it is that you're coming in contact with can be used for the service of the Lord, then it is spiritual. So that maybe changes a little bit the understanding of what people tend to think of material and spiritual. They maybe think that if something's spiritual, it's kind of mystical and it gives off a glowing light. You take a flower and then you offer it to Krishna, and then the flower becomes spiritual. And when people smell the flower, then they become purified by smelling the fragrance. And so some people would think, well, how could you distinguish that this flower is material and this flower is spiritual? This one doesn't look like it's glowing, doesn't seem to be any different or any more special than the material thing. So the real onus is on the perceiver to be able to change how he sees things and how he interacts with the environment around him. And that's why our society is called the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It's a global movement started by Srila Prabhupada in 1966. It was very popular with the hippies at that time, who were trying to renounce the material world, but they weren't quite sure how they were going to be able to make everything become spiritual. So it's a very simple philosophy and process. Everything is connected through service to Krishna, and then it's considered spiritual, whatever it is. And anything that's material can be made spiritual, and also something which is spiritual can be seen as material also. Like the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha mantra is a spiritual sound vibration, but it could be taken as a material sound vibration, depending on how you approach. So very much the onus is on us, the perceiver of the phenomena around us. How do we perceive things? In what consciousness do we perceive things? So here it's being explained very simply. If we see things for our enjoyment, then they're enjoyable for us. Then we're actually giving up the connection of that object with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, rather than seeing this object is meant for Krishna's pleasure. We think, oh, this object is meant for my pleasure. But if the senses are purified, then they're also spiritual. So this tendency to want to enjoy things and possess them and use them for ourselves, this is something which can become purified, so that we no longer have that tendency. And then we become situated on the transcendental platform. As we become less and less selfish, more and more selfless, more and more inclined to serving and helping others with compassion, then the more we become free from the material entanglement. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because generally, if you're imprisoned in something and you want to get free from that prison, then you're thinking of ways to get out of the prison. When actually, if you just change your consciousness, then you're no longer entrapped in the prison. You become liberated. So we have a tendency to think of things in terms of physically I'm here and I want to get free. So when I'm liberated, I'll go flying up into the clouds. But we have to change the consciousness. That's how we become liberated. And then Prabhupada ends by saying, in our preaching work, We do, so preaching in the sense of our methods of spreading this awareness, this different approach to life, this different consciousness to see things in this way. In our attempts to spread that, then we need property, we need books, we need lights, we need buildings, we need microphones, we need books and book stands, so many things that we need. But they should never be considered material. Everything should be understood that this is for Krishna's service, and that's why we have it. And if we rigidly observe the principle of chanting 16 rounds, so the most important, sometimes devotees, they get very committed to projects. We're going to be building this huge skyscraper building in central Glasgow, and we're so committed to the project. We really want to do this, and everything else is secondary to this. But the real project, the real thing to be committed to, is to the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha mantra. And Prabhupada's asking for 16 rounds, which is roughly about 2 hours of chanting. And this process protects us, insulates us from the tendency to see the material energy as something for our enjoyment. So this is the vaccine. We've been in a pandemic for some time now, and there's a lot of emphasis on getting vaccinated, getting 2 jabs. So in Krishna consciousness, we get 16 jabs every morning. And it takes 2 hours. And then if you've chanted nicely, then you're inoculated from the effect of the material energy. And every day is a fresh start in our lives. We circumambulate Tulsi Devi. We're freed of all kinds of mistakes and offenses we may have made the day previous. We pay our obeisances to the devotees. We beg for forgiveness. And then we go forward. And then from that day, we chant our 16 rounds. And we attempt to perform pure devotional service. Any questions or comments? Hello, how are you?
Okay, thank you, yourself.
Yeah. Where are you from?
Hungary.
Hungary, oh. Okay, I won't even try saying anything because it's so bad. Yoishtal. No, okay, forget it.
Yeah.
So, did you have any questions from that?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
Just about the objects for our enjoyment.
Yeah.
Actually, not so long ago, I looked a little bit into feminist philosophy.
Feminist?
Yeah. And one thing they say, and what actually disturbs them in general, that that men tend to see as women, and vice versa, women tend to see men as well as a object of enjoyment.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a well identified problem. But when I looked into their solutions, they don't really have a proper solution for it. Because unless you purify your consciousness with the transcendental sound vibration, there will be the tendency will remain to look at something. This is for my material enjoyment, especially if you grow up in a society when everything around you is just like stimulating your senses. So the real solution is actually to purify your consciousness only then. They call it objectification, but if you look at that not as a person, but as an object for your enjoyment. Yeah. So it requires purification of consciousness. There is no other solution actually. You can't just beat it over the head and don't look at it as a sense object. You actually have to purify your consciousness.
It takes maybe some faith as well. It's like we're all sitting here, we're on the same page, we can all accept. Well, first of all, we accept consciousness, because there are some countries where they don't have a word for consciousness. So we can sit here and we can think, consciousness, okay, consciousness, we've got consciousness. So we can think about that, which is in itself quite interesting. But then we can think, oh, I would like my consciousness to be better than it is right now. And so we could call that purifying your consciousness. You could call it expanding your consciousness, elevating your consciousness, stimulating your consciousness, energizing your consciousness. And then when you get into all these different realms of how to deal with the consciousness and change the consciousness, and that's really when the hippie culture really took off, because they suddenly realized, I don't have to worry about making my house clean or painting it a different color, or even decorating it. I just drop this thing, and oh look, there's colors everywhere, you know. Wow. And my house looks like a palace. And I don't have to do any work, because I just do that, and then everything's there. You know, my old car looks like a golden chariot. My girlfriend looks like Miss Universe. You know, everything's fantastic. I just have to change the consciousness. So the idea is good. It's a good idea, but the method of doing it is not so good. Everything becomes. But the idea is a really good one. Yeah, we should. But it would be to get people on that page, first of all, to accept. Do you accept that if you changed your consciousness, that would solve a lot of the problems that you're experiencing? Because if you don't change your consciousness, and even if you do get all the material objects for your enjoyment, you get a big yacht, you marry 5 wives, you have a huge car, you have a massive house, it's not going to guarantee. In fact, it proves quite often counterproductive to get these things, because it becomes more and more obvious that this is a futile attempt. What I need to do is address my consciousness. Why am I not a nice person? Why am I not a kind, loving person? If I was kind, if I was loving, if I was well-intentioned, if I was charitable, if I had high integrity, if I wanted to serve others, then we kind of know, well, then I would be really happy. So how do I get from where I am now to where I would like to be? How do I? So then maybe the person would have at least the idea to think, well, okay, I'm not sure about whether you can purify your consciousness, because surely your consciousness is always pure, because your consciousness doesn't get dirty, right? You don't spray your ear with deodorant to make your consciousness fresher. Because, you know, nobody really think, well, purify my consciousness, or I'll go and have a shower. It's not going to purify the consciousness. I mean, people have an idea, well, I'll go into the countryside, and because the countryside is in the mode of goodness, whereas in the city, everything that's man-made is in the mode of ignorance, or in the mode of passion at the best. So we change the mode. So we go into the countryside, and we look how beautiful everything is, and everything looks very tidy in the countryside. It looks like the grass has been hoovered. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's like, oh, someone's been hoovering the grass. It's all nice, you know. Everything's nice and clean. The sky is clean. Everything's nice. So immediately, when we're in a clean, ordered environment, then the consciousness automatically changes. So that's how we can start to clarify what we mean, and how we can understand scientifically, oh, I can purify my consciousness, you know. And if you do meditation, do you do meditation? Yeah. You can see, isn't it? It makes a change, a difference. You do some meditation, you think of the right thing for a while, you become fixed on it, and then when you stop, you go away, and you feel in a much better mood. You deal with things in a much nicer way because of doing the meditation than you would if you didn't. You know, if people are not inclined to do meditation, it's like just rolling out of bed in the morning, and you don't brush your teeth, you don't shower, you don't change your clothes, and you just go and start the day like that. Well, it's not going to be very good, you know. So if you start the day with a smelly consciousness, a dirty consciousness, and the mind it can be dirty. It can get dirty. Generally, if people wear the same clothes, even if you're living outside on the street, there's only so long you can wear the same clothes before they start dropping off you, because they become that smelly and sweaty, they just start falling apart. So you can only do it for so long. But with the mind, you can have your mind contaminated for year after year after year, and it can just get dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. It's like a sponge just soaking everything up, all these subtle impressions, all these images, all these bad attitudes, all this negativity, all this nasty stuff that the media saturates us with. And you can have a very, very contaminated consciousness. And even if you decide, right, I'm going to do my meditation now every day, no problem. And you start washing it. So you get your brain and you're giving it a good wash. Then when you bring it out, it's definitely a bit cleaner than it was. But because it's been so full of things for so long, you have to keep doing it every day. Give it another scrub, and then the next day, and another one, and another one. And even you're doing it for years, it takes a long, long, long time. So it takes serious, determined commitment to follow through if you want to achieve the real goal of meditation and really, really purify your consciousness. And sometimes it's a little bit discouraging because you don't realize how dirty it is until you start washing it. And then you see the water and it's like, oh my God, that must be filthy. Look at the color of the water. And you pour the water away and you fill the bucket again. And again, it's filthy, and you can think, oh no, this is terrible. And so sometimes people become discouraged. They start doing their meditation and then they realize this is going to take a long, sustained effort. So let me discontinue and just pretend everything's going to be okay, everything's fine, So there needs to be determination. And that's why association is really useful. If you're in amongst people that have been committed to the process of meditation for a long time, then you realize, okay, obviously they're feeling the benefits of doing it, otherwise they wouldn't be continuing on. And even though it seems a daunting, almost unsurpassable achievement to become fully purified, these people are applying themselves, and they've experienced sufficient encouragement to continue on with the process of meditation and purification. So obviously the longer the person's been doing it, the louder it speaks. This is a good thing to do. If everyone was taking up Krishna consciousness and practicing it for 3 months and then giving up and going away, then obviously people would have doubts. Well, is this really the thing to do? Most people seem to just give it up after a short period of time. But it's an interesting, it's not something that you'll come across if you go into a library and you have all the books there. Say you have 3 million books. How many of the books are going to have within their pages the statement, you should purify your consciousness? It's only going to be a handful. Because most of them are not even thinking that that's a problem, or that you should try to do that. They're just rolling around in the material energy.
And material, there is one gentleman called Maslow. He created a pyramid of human needs, starting from physical, going up, higher and higher. You fulfill this, you go higher, you do this and higher. And at the top is called self-actualization, which also includes purification, seeing the thing, from the higher vision, is the whole world. So it says only like a 1% of people actually get there.
Get to the top.
Or I don't know what to speak about, will be willing to get there, or understanding the value.
But he also said that first you have to fulfill the bottom once to get to the top. So first you have to be safe, eat, be successful enough to achieve the top.
So if you are struggling to fill your stomach, it's difficult to think about spiritual subject matter.
So his idea was that was the ultimate goal, but you have to achieve these other things first as a foundation, and then build up to the pinnacle, and then achieve that. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you know so much about the teachers, and we have a whole lineage of teachers. And about 500 years ago, there were 6 very special teachers, which we call the Six Go Swamis. And what's interesting about them, if you look at their lifestyle, Shishikorodhitai Maya Poshashiki Jana. They were, most of them were very highly placed. They were like prime ministers, and they had vast amounts of wealth. And one of them had a very beautiful wife that he'd only just recently married. And they went from this really, really materially comfortable. You would think, well, if they're really comfortable, and now that everything's really, really good for them, now they can get into self-actualization and just start thinking about that. And they've got everything else covered. They've got a nice bed to sleep in that night, good food on the table, no holes in their socks. Everything's great, okay? But then they went from that to living under a tree with nothing. They were just in a loincloth with nothing. It was just a phenomenal. I mean, it's easier to renounce myself. I came from a very, very small house in Manchester, and I joined the temple at that time, which was in Chaitanya College, and it was massive. It was just, we spent most of our time just trying to find people in Chaitanya College. They'd say, go and find Bhakta Bob. So I go off to find Bhakta Bob, and Bhakta Bob would turn up and they'd say, go and find Bhakta Tony, he's looking for you. So then Bhakta Bob would go and find me, and I'd come back and he'd say, oh, Bhakta Bob's looking for you. So that'd be like half the day gone, and then finally find him, and what we're going to do, it's too late. Bhakta Fred's done it now.
There's no WhatsApp, bro. No WhatsApp or something?
No, there was no WhatsApp. The only phones were, there wasn't even phones actually at that time. The first phones that came out were like house bricks, and people had them, were like, there was one or two of them on the street, and they were like, oh, hi, John, hi. Like trying to show everybody, look, I've got this mobile phone, And so anyway, you spent most of your time running around trying to find people because it was massive. But for me, coming from where I'd come from, it wasn't like renunciation for me because I didn't have anything anyway. It wasn't like I'd been a prime minister and lived in a palace. I had nothing anyway, practically. So when I joined, it was like I ended up with more than what I'd had to start with, So it wasn't. But when we look at the Goswamis, that's the 6 Goswamis there. They're just in one or two cloths. They slept for only 1 or 2 hours a day, and they ate. Sometimes they would forget to eat, and then only a very, very tiny amount. So everything, they just gave up. They renounced everything. So when you reach the point of self-actualization, the pyramid kind of just dissolves. And this little particle that's now self-actuated realizes, well, I don't need all this. And then it just goes off. And it lives in a very, very minimal way, Now that it's switched on and aware that it doesn't need all this stuff, then immediately it can just... And why that's really important to have people like that is, it shows the people that are in this pyramid, that are doing all this stuff, that the goal is to get free from it. The goal is to reach the top and then kick it all away. And then become really, really free of anxiety and become peaceful and become liberated. And if they try to do that artificially, obviously they'll be very, very miserable because they'll be thinking about this, all these things they've given up, and I wish I had this, and I wish I had that. So you go through it, but that's the goal, is to come through at the other end and then to want nothing, So, and sometimes I'm thinking, I wish I had more of this, or I wish I had more of that, and things are so tough. And I think, well, the goal is to get to the point of the 6 Goswamis who had nothing, who gave up everything. And that means really purifying the consciousness, getting free from all the selfishness, all the greedy things, all the things that you think you need, and transcending it.
They would be able to do
Yeah.
Krishna purification in established in the loving eternal relationship and satisfy the needs.
Yeah, that's a nice point. That should be, when a person is satisfied, then he's no longer, and it's not just that he's satisfied, it's just that he's now been given something so much better. It's like having lots of plastic jewelry, you have all this blingy stuff, and it's massive necklaces and big, and you're going around showing everybody in its massive rings, and then someone gives you a beautiful, pure 22 karat gold necklace, and you put it on, and it looks so exquisite, and then all these blingy things look really cheap and nasty, so it's like, oh, get rid of that. And then you end up with just this because it's so much nicer, and then anything else would just lower the whole tone of how you want to appear, So once you get the highest, the most exquisite, the most satisfying, nourishing, fulfilling experience consciousness, achieve that consciousness, then you will lose automatically the taste for these lower things. They won't enamor you anymore. You become free from the attraction to the glare of the material energy. Material energy is very enticing, and that's the challenge. Can you be sufficiently established in your meditation that you can resist the glare of the material energy and not become distracted on the path? You know.
A couple of months ago, I think, in the Untitled Chapter, where Krishna speaks with Uddhava, and he explains what is the real wealth, or what is, how to become truly wealthy. It's one of the most important things in saying is to a truly wealthy person is one who is satisfied. Because if you are not satisfied, if you want more and more and more, it is no question of being wealthy. It means whatever I have now, even it's billions, if I'm not satisfied, that I cannot be called wealthy. Only person who is truly satisfied, even if he has nothing, then is truly wealthy, because he's satisfied with what he has. So this is the point about changing one's consciousness and becoming satisfied. You can surpass so many items of the pyramid because you are satisfied. It means you don't need so much, or you really need.
And also because it's a sense, then you should be able to check in and say, okay, I've been meditating for, I don't know, 10 years. So where am I now, and where was I 10 years ago? And we should be seeing, if we're doing meditation properly, then we should be seeing that we're making progress. And also our relationships change as we change, because people that knew you, they say, they come up and they go, oh, you just don't seem the same person as you normally were. And it's true, you're becoming a different person. You're actually becoming your real self, and you're giving up all these false images and identities that you're trying to project to impress people, but you're no longer trying to impress those people anymore. So you've given up playing those parts, and you're being yourself more. So the people are like, well, you're not who you used to be, you know. So it should be like that. So then the relationships change, and then you're attracted to different people. You want to have friendship with different people than you would have had before you were practicing meditation. So this is why it's very, very important to associate with people that you would like to become like. And it's not that we're rude to people that don't want to practice some type of process of purification of the consciousness, but we don't respect them in the same way. We don't value their opinions. So we can still value them as a person and be kind and nice to them. But when they make some statement about their opinion about, how you should lead your life, then we don't hold a lot of importance. We don't allow that to really affect us. So that's actually quite an art, because you may be attached to people that are not wanting to practice purifying their consciousness, and due to that attachment, it may make you lose your enthusiasm to practice, you see. So it's how to be loving and kind to people, but not to allow them to influence us or divert us on the path that we've started on, and to take the association of people that can inspire us more and more to commit more deeply, more seriously to purification of the consciousness. And it is actually quite nice. The process of purification is actually quite nice. It's not that we all come into the temple room in the morning at 5 o'clock and we all start whipping each other for 2 hours, You fool, you greedy pig, and we're slapping each other all over the place, and that's how we become purified. But it's actually purification is actually nice, just like having a bath is nice. Washing off all the dirty things is nice. And when you come out, you feel refreshed, invigorated, and inspired to continue on.
A small comment. Tradition, the life of Saint Francis, we see how he was born and raised with so much of wealth and everything. But then at a point in time, he left it, gave it voluntarily, willingly, and then how he was able to inspire others as well and take up into faith more strongly, and actually do lots of encourage people into taking spiritual consciousness, and it really brought about a big shift in their life and the way they were seeing things.
Yeah. Yes, that's one of the symptoms of when the consciousness is purified. Although there are stories you can read in the Bhagavatam, the fifth canto. If you read the third canto, there's a story of Swayambhuva Manu and his daughter Devahuti and Kapila Dev. And one of the benefits of being actualized, when you have self-actualization, when you do get that, okay, you can live under a tree and there's no problem, but you can also live in a palace and there's no problem. You know, whatever you may need to show people that living in a palace is okay if you do it in the right consciousness, and you may need to show other people that it's okay to live under a tree. You don't need all this stuff. So that just depends on time and circumstance and the type of people that we're trying to attract to spiritual life. Because for ourselves, we could live it a lot more simply than we are now, but we have so much facility here because we want to attract people. People are attracted to lifestyle, and also people like socializing. They like to be able to talk and get together and have entertainment. And so we want people to be attracted, and then once they get on the path, they'll naturally become less interested in these things. You know? But we accept that, you know, people do like nice material facility. So here's how to use it in a way that you don't become entangled, your consciousness will be elevated, and you'll get to the point of becoming detached from these things. If you have material things and you're really attached, then your degree of anxiety and fear is directly in proportion to the degree of attachment you have for things around you of which there is no endurance. Krishna says there's no endurance. All material things, there's no endurance. In spiritual things, there is. So you could say, well, you say this microphone is spiritual because you're using it to speak about Krishna, but there's no endurance. It will break down. So the microphone itself, the material object, will break down, but the principle won't break down. That anything that I come in contact with, I can use it in Krishna's service. So it should be like that.
We come in contact with could be used in Krishna's service. So, and in the purport also, like Rupa Goswami mentions that nothing is material as such, and everything could actually be used in the service of Krishna.
Yeah.
So, could, like, say, drugs, how can we, or could it be used in the service of Krishna if I'm consuming drugs or the money coming from drugs?
The drugs can be used in the service of Krishna because if you're in an accident and say you lose a leg and you're in tremendous pain, then we can give you morphine. And the morphine will take away the pain. They can come and sew your leg back on, and in a few weeks you'll be okay, you know. So you can use the drug, and it can be used in Krishna's service so that you can keep your body together. So the question is really not whether it's a drug or wherever the particular function is how the challenge is how can I see that can be used in Krishna's service. It's like they say that if you were the person who's really angry all the time, then you can learn to become very tolerant. It's like one boy, the angel, he was going down to take his birth, and the angel said to him, I've been looking after you all these lifetimes, and you're almost there, you're almost perfect. Is there anything that you would like to learn? And the boy said, well, I would like to learn forgiveness. And the angel says, okay, go down on earth and take birth, and I'm going to come down as your enemy. And the boy said, oh, why are you going to come down as my enemy? And the angel said, so I can teach you forgiveness. So whatever it is, whether it's drugs or people being your enemies or people being horrible or situations being difficult, it's like there's a film called The Wisdom of Trauma. It's been made by a Hungarian called Gabor. I was watching some of it last night. There was a nice devotee who was speaking to me about she'd been through a very traumatic experience and her husband had died and she's still trying to recover from it. And he's trying to show how you can change the way you react to things so that you can gain so much from whatever difficulty that you're going through. But you have to learn this ability of how to do that. And that is a great art, to be able to do that, to be able to always put Krishna in the picture and always step forward and render service proactively, trying to assist in wherever the situation is. And you see the drug, okay, it's heroin. Okay, well, that's going to be difficult to use in Krishna's service unless it's going to be of some medicinal. And if it's not, this is going to put me into the mode of ignorance. And that's why we follow the 4 regulative principles: no sex outside of marriage, no intoxication, no eating meat, and no gambling. Because these activities will compromise your ability to purify your consciousness. They'll contaminate the consciousness, When you hand someone a bar of soap and say, go and have a shower, you're automatically saying, oh, and by the way, don't rub mud all over yourself. And he'd be like, well, of course I'm not going to rub mud all over myself. I'm going to go in the shower. I'm trying to get clean, But if people don't realize that this is mud, that this is contaminating, then they go into the shower and they got a bar of soap in one hand and they've got a bucket of dirt in the other hand, and they're like soaping up and then putting the mud over themselves, And I remember one time I went to all these yogi meetings and they were all doing meditation, and then they stopped doing the meditation. They all went out and all having a cigarette. And that was a good meditation, wasn't it? So it's like you've just cleansed yourself, and now you're going to go and contaminate everything again. So we have to be clear of what is purifying the consciousness, and what, if we don't use it in the right way, whether it's a drug or relationship with somebody, how does the relationship purify? Oh, okay, so this is the right way to do it, and this is the wrong way to do it. There's a right way and a wrong way. And the wrong way is it will contaminate the consciousness, and the right way is it will purify the consciousness. You'll elevate the consciousness. So I had friends that were taking drugs, and we were all taking drugs for the same reason, to purify our consciousness. And then I phoned them up and I said, I've found this is actually the way to purify your consciousness. No. I'm doing it this way. And then years later, I come back and about a third of them are not alive anymore. And some of them went to prison, and some of them are quite disturbed and upset. So that was their process for purifying their consciousness. But 10, 20 years later, we see that didn't really work out the way it was supposed to, And that's what illusion means. Illusion means something seems to be this, but actually it's not. It's this. And Bhagavatam is one of our main books for helping us to distinguish, is this illusion or is this real? Is this reality? And it's helpful because it can save you a lot of time. If you don't know it's an illusion, it can look like the real thing, Instant purification. Simply put it into a glass of water, mix it up, and pour it down, and you will be instantly purified. This is the kind of cheap idea of what purification will be. I'll just take this chemical, everything will go different inside, it will be great. But then does that really happen over a long period of time, a sustained period of time? If it did, then a lot of hippies would be becoming saints, and they'd be living under trees and being renounced and being really kind and charitable to people. But that didn't happen. They just became smelly and dirty and frustrated. Okay, I'll finish there. ISKCON Guru Vrinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Go Premanandi, Haribo. Go to Bhakti Vrinda ki, Jai.